introduction to cloud computing. In this particular chapter, we are going to begin with first what is cloud computing, cloud characteristics, cloud computing service models, what are the different deployment models in cloud computing, and finally, we will discuss advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing. So, what is cloud computing? Cloud is a metaphor for the internet. When we say cloud, we are actually just referring to internet. Simple, cloud is internet. So when cloud is internet, what is cloud computing? I repeat, I am now talking about the term cloud computing. When we say cloud is internet, what is cloud computing? In the simplest term, cloud computing means storing and accessing data and programs over the internet instead of our local computer hardware. To understand this, let us come from the way traditional applications are hosted or executed. See, most of the time the application is going to be either on my local machine or sometimes it can be on my LAN network within my local network. So when the application is either on my local machine or on my LAN network, obviously the local machine hardware should be efficient enough to handle all the program speed and manage the data. If not on my local machine, even if it is on a local network, there will be something called as a data center within my organization in which all my programs are going to be residing, and that is also where my data is going to reside. Maybe SQL Server is managing my data and there would be some web application which is accessing the data from SQL Server and presenting it, and on my local machine I would just view it in the form of browser. Or it can be something like an application is running on my machine but using the data from the data center where my SQL Server is hosted, and that is one which is managing my huge amount of data for the organization. Here there is a cost. The cost is we have to procure licenses for all the required softwares, like the Windows operating system license would be required, or if you are using Linux operating system, if on Linux, on top of Linux you will have certain additional software whose licenses may be required. If not Linux operating system, you will have to buy databases which are going to host your data. Not only licenses, but also there will be a lot of administration required in terms of ensuring that we have proper RAM used, memory used, proper storage used. There is always a proper network connectivity. Proper upgradation of the softwares are done on time. There is a backup taken care of, and in case of requirement, restoration should be easy enough. So a lot of administration task is also an overhead. Now in the modern world, we want to get rid of this. Now how can we get rid of this? Obviously we cannot simply get rid of complete hardware. So what we want to now basically do is move all the data centers, all the hardware where my complex applications and large amount of data is going to be stored in my local organization, move all that to some service provider infrastructure. That means we are now going to buy from somebody the hardware as a service and move all the computing power to that hardware and get rid of the complete hardware on our local network. In simplest word, cloud computing means storing and accessing data and programs over the internet. Now what is this over the internet? Obviously that remote data center where my programs are residing, where my data is residing, I am going to access through internet. So I repeat, cloud is just nothing but internet and ability of ours to move all the computing power. That means all my hardware, along with the hardware, all the software onto internet is what I'll call it as cloud computing. Yes, the phrase cloud computing means a type of internet based computing where the different services such as servers, storage and application are delivered to an organization computer through the internet. This is the most important definition. Cloud computing refers to variety of services available over the internet that deliver computing functionality on a service provider infrastructure. When I say service provider infrastructure, basically it means that the data centers which are taken care by some third party. All my data is moved into that data center from my local environment. So it consists of optimized data centers that provide hardware, software and information resources. So cloud platform hides the complexity. That means I now don't have to worry about how to maintain the hardware, how to ensure the continuous power supply for that hardware. I don't have to take care of the upgradation of the operating system, wherever needed applying service packs. I don't have to do lot of backup and recovery. All these things now are taken care by the service provider. I would be only responsible for hosting my applications into that environment, using them, and most important, use only the hardware to the extent my application needs. Use the storage again as per the requirement. And of course, we are going to get something called as elastic effect, where we can increase or decrease the computing power as per our requirement. Because many a times that data center is not going to be dedicated for us, it will be shared between many customers, thus reducing the overall cost. Of course, I am going to talk about these things in cloud characteristics, but yes, overall, remember cloud computing is about ability of us to move all our softwares, storages, applications and services onto a third party infrastructure, basically a service provider infrastructure, who is going to manage large data centers on our behalf and provides us a lot of backend services at a very nominal cost. And that is the major reason why cloud computing is already very popular among the startup organizations. In the beginning of the organization, rather to begin an organization, the biggest hurdle anybody would have is how will I invest in the huge amount of hardware which probably might get obsolete by the time my product comes out. Yes, you don't have to do that anymore. You can simply have a good connectivity with internet, and through that internet use all the infrastructure of the third party data centers. The cloud is what we're calling it as. So now that you understand what is cloud computing, let us understand what are the cloud characteristics. Characteristics of cloud computing that distinguishes it from traditional hosting. Now what do I mean by traditional hosting? Suppose I am an independent developer, and if I develop one application which I want the world to make use of, the option which I had was to buy a dedicated server on internet, and if it is a web-based application, on that dedicated server which I buy, I would install the web server, and if required a database server, and I take care of that complete web server and the database server. The biggest challenge there is what should be the configuration of that dedicated server. If I take a small sized dedicated server in terms of RAM and storage, when the traffic increases, the performance of the application would be affected. But if I take too big, which can probably accommodate sudden surge in my traffic, I might end up using my hardware rarely on only special occasions, but most of the time I may not need that kind of hardware. So these are the basic problems what we had in traditional hosting, where we would probably purchase a dedicated server and keep it for us throughout, and consistent hardware, same sized disks, same computing power throughout the year or throughout the lifetime. No, we may not want to have something like this. In modern world, the traffic surges suddenly we get spike in the traffic, and many other times it might even go down below average. So we want to have all these things accommodated, and cloud does this pretty well. Why? Because of the cloud characteristics. First cloud characteristic is it is remotely hosted. Now, what do I mean by the term remotely hosted? All the services and data are hosted on a remote infrastructure. Cloud is always remotely hosted. If I host everything within my infrastructure, obviously it is not cloud. It is not being used through internet. And the very basic requirement of cloud is we connect to the remote infrastructure through internet. So yes, cloud is remotely hosted and it is ubiquitous. Basically, it is present everywhere. Once you have hosted your application onto the cloud, and if you have access to internet, we can say that it is accessible from anywhere in the world. Wherever we have connectivity to internet, from there we can access our data, our applications. The ideal example I can take is Google Drives. We can store our data on a Google Drive or OneDrive, and then that thing becomes accessible from everywhere. If I'm in one country or another country, I just need connectivity to internet and all my files from that particular drive is accessible. Resilience. Cloud provides generally mirrors solutions to multiple data centers to minimize downtime even in the event of disaster. See, if I am maintaining only one dedicated server, there is a very good chance that for some reason that dedicated server goes down. The moment that dedicated server goes down, all my services are down. Nothing is going to work thereafter. But most of the cloud infrastructures are going to provide a way for you so that the same application can be present onto multiple locations in multiple different data centers. And they are generally at very distant geographical location. Maybe 300 miles, 400 miles will be the distance between each of the data centers maintained by the service provider. So by any chance, if one data center goes down, maybe because of the huge power failure, or can be because of some war, or because of the floods, still my application would be made available through the other data center. Why? Because the copy, the mirror of my application, my data is there on multiple data centers. And this is also one of the characteristics of a cloud. On-demand self-service. A consumer can himself provision cloud computing capabilities. That means server time, network storage as needed can be automatically increased or decreased based on my software requirement, and I don't have to consult some intermediate human. There is no human interaction required. So basically we will have a dashboard, a control panel through which we can probably increase the capacity as needed. We just need to configure and say I want 16 GB RAM, maybe 32 GB RAM or 64 GB RAM, and I get it. And very important thing, in cloud we only pay for what we use, and mostly in terms of the minutes or hours they are charged. Higher configuration will be charged more per minute, lower configuration will be charged less per minute, but most of the time it is on demand charge, which is per minute or per hour. Basically it is referred as pay as you go model. Rapid elasticity. User can utilize as much or little of the cloud service as required. That means you're not fixing, when you go into agreement with cloud, you're not fixing the amount of hardware. Your traffic based scale up or scale down can be configured within the cloud. And most of the times cloud provides a facility where automatically this thing would happen. That means as my traffic increases or as the load on my server increases, automatically the computing power also would increase. Multiple virtual machines would come into the scene. And when the traffic goes down, gradually the extra hardware acquired, extra computing power acquired can be released. So this elasticity is also one beautiful feature which most of the time cloud provides us. Service providers of cloud provide us. Broad network access. When you are having an application hosted on cloud, you can use those applications in heterogeneous thin or thick client platforms. Can be on mobile phones, can be on desktops or laptops, can be on tablets or PDAs. from anywhere you can make use of those applications. And cloud applications have to ensure that they are suited enough for all these different types of devices. Fully managed by the provider, most important of all. The complete cloud environment is managed by the provider. All administration tasks are taken care by the provider. Let the administration be in terms of software updates, hardware updates, patches, installing of plugins, web security, backup and recovery. All these things are completely managed by the service provider, which is providing us the cloud service. The optimum utilization of resources and as well as sharing of resources is possible. As I told you before, cloud is an environment in which not just my applications, but even other organizations would probably host the applications. So in one data center, there will be many organizations connecting, and because of that, the resources can get shared. May not be the software, but surely the hardware computing power will get shared. And that way the overall cost is going to be reduced for us. So yes, now we pretty well understand what is cloud compute, what is cloud internet, what is cloud computing. Computing, that means hosting of our applications, that is programs and data, onto a third party infrastructure managed by a service provider having their own data centers, and use those applications through internet. Present always cloud services are available to us on demand and are always on, available anywhere, anytime, and at any place. Why are businesses moving to cloud? We don't have to do, we can get away easily all the licensing cost, protection of data, frequent upgrades, maintenance, and all that. And finally, what are the cloud characteristics? Remotely hosted, present everywhere, data applications are mirrored, so will be available, there will not be any downtime. On demand, self-service, we can activate the service on demand when needed. We don't have to request somebody in between. Rapid elasticity, we can increase or decrease the computing power as per the requirement and traffic. Broad network access, accessible from many places and on different devices, and completely managed by the provider, getting our maintenance reduced. We'll continue with this in next session. Thank you.